Jose Alvarez, been in West Chester since 1986, and I was trustee when it was back called Union Township from 1995 through 2005. By that time, it was West Chester.
Okay. Do you know what? So what brought you here? What moved you to
West Chester,
Township?
to Union Township?
Yeah.
It was a job change. I worked for GE Aviation for 13 years back east, and got a job offer to come and work in Evendale.
Okay. And what was West Chester like when you moved here? What did it feel like?
Let's see. People complained that there was no place to eat. People complained that Tylersville Road was too small for the traffic, and there were no lights on it to protect people from getting hurt in their autos. Other than that, everybody liked it, but it was a little tough for families, to get around and to do things. Keener Park was here, but the amenities weren't many. And I believe McGinnis Park was here, but that was basically fields, right?
So still a lot of farms here.
Oh, there were.
Frame, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when did you decide that you wanted to get involved in public service and become a trustee? What inspired that move?
Well, I've always been involved to some degree or other with what's going on in my community. Back east, I was involved in some things, not a lot because of the pressures of work, obviously, in a small family. But I first got involved, I believe I was on the land use committee for a few years, was very involved with the YMCA up in Liberty Township. So I had some inkling as to what was going on in the community. And when the opportunity came, Gary Cates went up to the State House. That was around the end of 96 towards the beginning of the end of 94 to the beginning of 95. Mm-hmm. He went up to the State House, had a slot opened, and and I decided I'd try to be part of what was going on. I had my own ideas of trying to bring in industry into the area and relieve some of the burdens of the townspeople. And I thought it would be a good fit. Plus, I'm technically oriented, and I figured that might be useful. But other than that, I always enjoyed the area. My boys grew up here. They went to Lakota schools. They played PYO ball and all that, so I was very much involved in that.
What do you remember about the first race for trustee that you were in?
Well, the first race didn't occur till 2 years later, because I was assigned the job. I was appointed. The first race was in 97, and I guess some people thought I was a long shot, but I always felt pretty comfortable. I learned that even though I'm rather drawn in, I'm somewhat shy, and I'm also kind of a recluse to a degree. And I hate to admit that on camera. But I had confidence that I could talk to people very casually and enjoy their conversation, as well as try to explain myself. And I'd learned something about myself, that I enjoy talking to people a lot more than I used to. Mm-hmm. So that grew, and I got elected. 4 years later, I got elected again. And then at the beginning of the next, cycle, I decided that it was time to leave. And I figured that was enough, and other people needed to come in and enjoy the fun.
Right. So who sat with you in your first term in office? Who else was on the board?
Tom Hayden and Catherine Stoker.
Okay. And Catherine was on the board through your whole term, wasn't?
Yes, she was. A slight correction: I came in the fall and Dick Alderson was still there.
Okay.
So my first 2 meetings, I think, Dick was there. Then Dick was leaving, and Tom Hayden, our former school superintendent, he came in. So okay, and then after he left, George Lang was there. So George.
Was Dave Takasik on the board anytime you were? Or?
Yes, he was. As a matter of fact,
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember what period. I think after Alderson and before Tom Hayden, I believe.
Okay. All right.
I'm trying to remember. You're bringing up dates all the way back.
That's all right.
No,
That's all right.
but I think that's right. Dave Takasik since passed away, so I've seen Tom a few times. He's still doing well. Yeah.
He's going to be in here with us tomorrow.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, how is the relationship with your fellow board members? Did you feel like you worked well together? Had a unified
respectful?
vision?
Yeah, respectful. Didn't agree all the time on items or certain pieces of items of issues, but we were respectful. Listened. I think that goes without saying that listening and talking during the course of the meetings and getting information was very important to us. Both Tom Hayden and myself agreed that it didn't matter who brought up the idea. If it was a good idea, then you put other things aside and you go with it. And we followed through with that during our entire term. We didn't always agree on everything, obviously, but the main thing is do it respectfully and listen, and sometimes you might adjust your thinking, sometimes you don't want to.
Right. And who was it always Dave Gully as the administrator during your time in office? Or?
Dave Gully, for the most part, was that, and when he left, Judy Boyko was in there. So the last few years, it was Judy. Yes, and at that time, George Lang was there also, and Catherine. Yeah.
Did and of course Pat Williams was the
Pat Williams.
in
in fact, I visited Pat Williams some time ago for her 100th birthday.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Good. I've got to figure out the secret, I guess.
But every time I talk to people, I don't have to ask who the fiscal officer or the clerk was. Because it was pretty much Pat Williams.
Now I have to think about it, but back then it was pretty easy. It was always Pat.
Yeah, it was always Pat. So, what do you think was your greatest accomplishment as a trustee here? What are you most proud of?
A few things. We kept true to our goal of supporting the land use and the zoning. We kept true to trying to bring in businesses to offload the tax burden. We worked hard at increasing the parkland. We, as a matter of fact, I was trying to think of this earlier on we developed Beckett Park with the soccer fields and all that with an exchange of land that was McGinnis Park off Cox Road. Many people who see that have no idea where McGinnis Park is, but that's where the UC Physicians and West Chester Hospital complex is. That used to be a park. We traded that for, I'm trying to think of how big it was. It was multiple times bigger than McGinnis. And we got chastised for doing that because many people remembered their beloved McGinnis Park. Right. But we actually increased the acreage of parkland. And most importantly, we got something towards the west side. So we thought it was a good idea to try to do that. And McGinnis was limited in what it could provide. One of the biggest accomplishments was following through, and I give a lot of credit to Dave Gully for this, was getting the Voice of America land. That wasn't just a simple turnover of the federal government to the township. they required a partnership with many other entities. They needed to sell land in order to decommission the place and take down all of the antennas and all the towers and all that. So they sold part of the land, like 60 acres. We shared the 20 acres with Miami University for their satellite facility. And then that was great, and it gave us about a square mile of land, but handling it was going to be difficult. That takes a lot of money and a lot of effort that the township wasn't in place to do. And after I left, the idea of going to the Metro Park of Butler County and having them take that over was a good idea. But getting the land initially was lots of work involved in trying to get the government to agree to it, and then later on facilitating the use of it. And now West Chester still is involved with the VOA Museum, which is still on site, and that's really a gem for the township.
Right. So let's go back just a minute, because you were talking about the trading of McGinnis property for Beckett property, and that was kind of happening the same time as the township was taking possession of the larger VOA properties. So
that happened, I think,
kind of
a bit earlier, if I
Right.
remember correctly. But yes,
but part of the reasoning
the
was
whole
that we
idea
were
was
gonna have this other
parkland.
park,
We
right?
needed green space and make sure that people in all of Westchester got a chance to have
Right.
green space.
Right. And then after the township acquired VOA Park, I mean, there was a movement by some residents toward a parks levy, right, to develop VOA Park?
There was, prior to that, there was, that would have taken a lot of money, and that wasn't successful. But we've had lots of efforts with levies. At one time, we also had the levy to try to develop a community center, which wasn't all too popular.
Right.
So, so the idea is people have a choice. They get an opportunity to state what they want most and offer opinions. And lo and behold, I think what came out of all this after 20 years was probably all good.
What was supposed to happen, probably.
I think, yeah.
So, yeah, the community center was a very contentious topic during
Right.
your term on the board, I think.
Right. One of the biggest issues with that is what most people who are involved in organizations and most people who get involved in fundraising and projects is building it isn't that hard. Maintaining it and fixing it and operating it are the challenge. So after X number of years, you really may or may not, doesn't always happen this way, you may or may not end up with a burden that you can't afford.
Right,
So
right.
that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's what I was concerned most about. But it works out at times.
It's
you know.
interesting because, now, being part of the community now, you still get people that are new to the community, and they're like, why doesn't Westchester have a community center or a community pool? And they weren't here for that part of our history.
Right, and well,
Understand.
that topic goes on probably on a daily basis throughout the country.
Yeah, right.
Because people have different locations that they move to and suburbs come up and all that. Just a side note on that, we had that argument with the YMCA, of which I was a part of, the argument of building a pool. You need a pool. Well, a pool is extremely expensive to operate, not just to build, but then the expertise you need for the pool starts becoming a demand.
Right.
And in today's, and this was back 20 years ago or 30, even in today's climate with labor, trying to fill some of those slots gets harder and harder.
Sure,
But the Ys serve their purpose. Some community centers do fine, and others are always scratching and clawing, trying to stay alive.
Right.
So one has to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other really significant thing you were here for was the whole Claim the Name campaign. I think
That was, I didn't mention that, but that was extremely important. We weren't West Chester, as you indicated at the beginning.
Yeah.
We were Union Township. One of the issues with that was there were probably 18 other Union Townships, very popular name as a result of the Revolutionary War, et cetera, et cetera. But back when, I guess it was second or third year of being a trustee, the consideration to change came up and to become West Chester, but at the same time we were developing our own zoning. Our police department had been started some years earlier, but the fire department was growing. So we were becoming a mini city. And at the same time, we had the legislation and pushed our representatives up in the State House to allow us to become a more independent township. That's true in Ohio, unlike any other state. So you have other states that have townships, but they're not like the way we have them in Ohio. We have, as I said, zoning and several other issues that most townships don't have in other cities or states like Pennsylvania, New Jersey even, and I think there are 4 other states that have townships, or 3 other states. Yeah.
I think, so the Claim the Name campaign was very popular, and people
absolutely
got very involved in it.
People wanted to have their identities. Dave Gully did a great job in facilitating that and bringing it up and sharing that vision with the populace. And it was a great campaign, well run, and it passed. I don't remember the percentages, but it went with a pretty high number.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I'm thinking probably 2 to 1, like 60 to 30.
It's like no question.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. So did you? I always think, we look at our community today, and to me, 30 years ago wasn't that long ago, really, when we talk about the 80s and the 90s, but how different our township is today from the time you first served in office. Do you think it's really, but I think people of your time and before, they had a vision that this is what West Chester would become. Do you think it's lived up to that vision people had?
Well, some people had a vision that we'd be blue ash, and that wasn't going to happen. We're sitting in the middle of 2 major highways, not to mention the cross county, which I have a story about that too. 3 rail lines. It's in a perfect spot, not too far from Dayton and not too far from Cincinnati. So it would be natural that you'd have freight and businesses developing in the township. And lots of people thought that was awful because it's nothing but warehousing, et cetera, and not many jobs, et cetera. But if you look at some of these buildings that had been back in the 80s that were glamorized as beautiful office buildings, lots of them are empty now. I'm not kidding. So, and that's not throwing any bad comments towards any town, but any other town. But the fact is, trying to diverse in industry is just as important as trying to diverse in your stock portfolio. We have lots of small businesses that do great here in West Chester because of population and ease of travel. And we have medium businesses, and we have some rather large ones. So that's great. And if it takes a rail line or a highway to try to facilitate that, all the better. So anyway, but there were arguments about trying to support even someone building a warehouse
Right.
back then, because people's vision was, well, we want office buildings. Well,
Okay.
you can't have office buildings everywhere.
Right.
And with, as I said, those utilities of the roads, the rail lines, etc., it just begs for developing other things besides just as warehouses.
Probably in the same sense that people, many people think they still want to see farms, right?
True.
You know, they want to see the open space.
If you want a farm, it goes back to the arguments that happened. In fact, I was just mentioning if our county engineer remembered when the argument was that we'd ruin people's vistas if we developed the valley. The
Right.
valley being what we call Union Center
Right,
now.
right.
And he says, oh, I remember people wanted to protect their vistas, like having farms. Well, there's an old saying that if you want that, then buy it. Because if you don't own it, there's no right to have that. So, and I'm a capitalist, and I believe that sincerely. I like green space as much as anybody else, and I enjoyed. We used to camp a lot as a family, but if it's not yours, you can't dictate that.
Right.
With exceptions with government.
Sure.
Yeah.
Parks. So tell me your story about the cross-county highway.
Oh, the Crosstown Highway. That shouldn't be built because no one is going to travel that way. And I go to Hamilton a few times every other month. Maybe I shop a little bit there, but there's a good radio station, a good radio show store that I shop at.
Okay.
But I also like visiting some of the pubs there. My boy plays in a band. I think I've mentioned that to you. So I've gone up there a bit.
Yeah.
And I laughed once driving out there in the middle of the night, thinking people used to complain that no one's going to go out there, so why are you building this highway? Well, it follows the old saying, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And this road is busy.
Right.
Because I've been on it day and evening and nighttime, and it is busy. And I remember driving on Tylersville Road, which didn't even have berms. The first time I drove out there, I thought I was going to die. And I was going to Hamilton. And it was a rainy day. And there was, if you came off the road or slipped, you were done. Or at least your car was, okay? Having that highway across the county is a great idea.
And I remember when my family moved out here, there were the signs up that said future home of the regional highway. You know, the
Right.
signs were up. But real estate agents at the time would say, oh, they've been talking about that forever. That will
Right.
never happen.
And I
So
guess they
it took a
had
long
at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it did happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the interchange was something that people didn't think was going to happen. Union Township,
Union Center.
Union Center. In fact, it wasn't going to be there. We talked of the Allen Road interchange. People forgotten that it was going to be a little south of that. And you asked a question that brought up a little funny story. You mentioned the fact that did things come out the way they should have,
Right.
or the way they were planned? No, because the city center wasn't going to be where you see it. We were going to have the city center over where North Point is.
Okay.
The idea is you lay out a plan, and there may be a dozen reasons why that won't work or may not work. But you start with a plan, with the intentions of what you want to accomplish, how to go about it, what are obstacles and what are benefits. And you start working, and as I said, Union Center the interchange was not going to be at Union Center. The township head, where we are now, that was all going to be moved over to the west. side.
Okay, so it was planned originally for more like Allen Road.
Allen Road and was going to be the interchange, but the offices and some of the development for stores,
The square and all of
offices and living quarters and all that was going to be really off to the west side.
Right.
And because of people owning the property and not agreeing to it and not seeing it the way other people did,
Right.
that all changed. But eventually, the intent was carried out by what we have at the streets, by what we have now developing over at the Union Center and
the square
and the square, et cetera. So the idea is you need a vision of some sort, and you need to progress in whatever direction is necessary, but you can get there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and Union Center was kind of a project made possible by a lot of partners, including private investors.
Correct.
That made that happen, and you had to have them on
Absolutely.
board to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Westchester was prime in trying to make private government, partnerships in order to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we had done a good job doing that, and I guess the results will prove in 10 more years. But I think it's going well.
Do you, it seems like it feels like a bit of an experiment. There's been attempts to become a city and those kinds of things over the years, but it feels like our community is well suited to this township form of government. And do you feel like that's worked out best for us? That's a
Personally, yes, I think so. I wasn't a supporter of the city movement. I guess we've had 3 attempts.
Yeah, it came up a few times.
I think at least 3. I think I've been here each one of them. But I've always supported remaining a township, mainly because I look at other cities and I surely don't need a board of 13 people. And you may say, well, it's more representation. Perhaps. Most of it becomes bickering and self-serving, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. But I surely think 3 people, one can argue that that's too few for a population that we have now. It's over 60,000, right? But it seems to have worked, and we have checks and balances. And until it doesn't work, I'd rather leave things the way they are.
Do you, so you were a trustee at a time of significant growth for the community. Is there anything you could point to? You talked about the fire department was growing pretty rapidly.
At least 1 or 2 stations went up, new stations went up, and we repaired the one on John Street. I remember that issue. So, yeah.
So you witnessed a lot of that. Did you? How was the board feeling about that at the time? Was it an acceptance that our community was growing, that we were going to have to meet the public safety needs of the community and grow those departments?
It had to be. I mean, even though this pushed the budgets, and I commend those departments for maintaining costs down as low as possible, but a population growth from 45,000 to 60,000, you've got to pay for that. Somehow, you have a couple of more stations, you have an expanded police department, which has to be available, maybe not everybody 24/7, but you need coverage at least 24/7. And our EMT group is unsurpassed. So that takes money. People can argue that too much growth is bad because of that. You can't stop it. Someone has a piece of property, it's zoned in a particular way. He or she has every right to build it and populate it. So I'm somewhat open with that topic because I'm a capitalist.
I understand.
And I own no property other than my house. So I'm not invested in any program or any project or
So
anything.
you raised your sons here for the most part.
My boys were, yeah.
Yeah. So do you look back, you feel like this was a great place to raise your family?
I thought the Lakota School District did a great job. I've always enjoyed when the chamber has events with the school. Mm-hmm. I always enjoy listening and at least learning something else. Both my boys were involved in band, which is great. I love music, but I can't even hum, so I enjoy that. But they were in marching band, and I always enjoyed the football games. So I still go to one or two of them during the fall. Yeah. So I enjoy seeing the band, but they one was a drummer and one played the tuba. So different than anything I can possibly do.
It was a loud house.
At times, yeah. At times, yeah.
Anything else? Any other good stories you have to share?
Oh, probably a few. In about 3 hours, I'll remember something. But the one thing I was going to say when we were talking about the developments and that is, last year, I guess, or was it the year before, we finished West Chester, Cincinnati-Dayton Road corridor. Mm-hmm. Oh, and it looks great. I absolutely love it. The old Western corridor was a great idea that was implemented, and the fixing of the road and the fixing of the sidewalks, most importantly, was a great idea. Right. That took probably about 20 years to go from planning to opportunity with regards to money and state help and all that other stuff, which I'm not familiar with anymore because that happened after I left. Mm-hmm. But one thing I thought about, that took 20 years from when us pushing it and trying to do it, and then it kind of floundering a bit. So I still have hopes that Route 42 will see a similar, some similar progress. It's not going to be old West Chester. Mm-hmm. It just isn't made up that way. But there's hope to fix it. And making it accessible for traffic, for walking traffic, mm-hmm. for sidewalks, etc., would be a big plus. Mm-hmm. Inlet, outlet of certain areas would also be a big improvement. But again, one has to be patient. It took 20 years to get West Chester corridor, old West Chester corridor done. Right. I always remind people about that. It doesn't happen overnight.
Because during your term, there were several attempts to kind of mount projects on Route 42. Several attempts. There was
at least one attempt. Yeah.
Yeah, to try to make things happen.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is about opportunity and finding the right thing that makes sense for the
and the dynamic that happens with the people involved in that. One big thing with going back to 42 was, and one of the accomplishments we did do was the interchange of Butler County Road and 42. Mm-hmm. That was a danger spot, always waiting to happen. Mm-hmm. And that was fixed.
The Butler Warren.
I'm sorry. I said the Butler Warren. That was finally fixed with a slight skewing of the roads and then a light. People said it couldn't be done. It just couldn't be done. And part of the problem is that's over a stream. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to build up, kind of like what you have in Sharonville. Right. On the main road, you've got that going over it's actually a bridge with water underneath it, and you see they're always working on that. But up in Route 42 and Butler Warren, that was always dangerous, and we managed to get agreement with, there were two, Mason, Warren County, Butler County, West Chester, mm-hmm. and the engineers in both. group. So it was a big group. We finally got that done, and that was that helped, and we didn't make it a 5-lane road like some people wanted.
Okay.
The route going through, because that would have made a highway and it wouldn't have helped the merchants on the side streets.
Right,
So.
right. So one last thing, because I always try to remember how this happened, but West Chester Road, what we know now is West Chester Road, wasn't always West Chester Road, was it? What was it called? Like before Union Center, was it something?
No, it was West Chester Road, but it didn't go the way you see it today.
It went.
There was a big knee in it, and that was dangerous too. And it went by Zoso's,
Okay. Right,
the salon.
Yeah.
That was a bar,
Okay.
probably an interesting bar. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And it was dangerous to go by because you had to do an angle, if I remember
Okay.
correctly. And somebody gave up some land, and we worked on that, and they straightened out that road, so now we're straight. The one that's even more interesting, and I don't want to take any more time, but the going down Lakota Drive, that had to be straightened out, and trading of land and all that, and cooperation, that going by or behind the school, I guess you would say,
Right.
that was taken care of also.
I
So
think some of those road issues were kind of addressed as a part of the Union Center project, wasn't it? They were kind of done in concert with that, or no? Was
I don't
it-
know if it was in concert. Now, we did use TIF monies for a lot of efforts.
Right.
I can't recall exactly which TIFs were
Right.
used.
Sure.
But that was a correction that had to be done for West Chester,
Yeah.
so one wouldn't have to go through.
Yeah, right.